Okay, so welcome to a walk through the bylaws. We're really just going to sort of skip through them um, real quickly. So the first slide coming up here has some graphics that I like to start with. Is that picture with the bylaws committee there just brings up sort of some of the myths that come along with bylaws, that they might just be really boring or you feel really flustered about getting through them and reading through them all. But really all they are is your GPS for your organization, for your PTA, which is your nonprofit group. So it provides a basic framework for your PTA and guides how the PTA functions. So it's like a roadmap that when used well, it can help to actually build relationships between board members and your PTA members. And when the bylaws are not followed as well, it could be a sign that your PTA is heading in the wrong direction and might need to steer course back onto the path. The bylaws are always there to help you answer your questions. I would say, if we are always here to support you, that's our role in district PTA. But if you want a question answered real quick, it's more often than not there in your bylaws, and we'll show you some other ways to find answers to your questions without coming directly to us, but we always welcome you to email us, call us with any questions about how to run your PTA. The bylaws are actually a legally binding document. Sometimes you'll need to submit them to various agencies in order to open a bank account, for example. And it's really important that everyone on your board is familiar with the bylaws. And if anyone asks, any members ask to see the bylaws, it's not, it's not a secret or anything. These are documents that are there to help everyone. So next slide, please. So when you start looking at your bylaws and getting familiar with them, you'll see that the first part of it, the chunk of it, has the purpose, the policies, the principles, the things that apply to every PTA. And our California PTA bylaws have a lot of, the structure of it is the same for all of our PTA bylaws across the state. The last 2 pages or so of your bylaws are referred to differently. Those are called the standing rules. And those things are much more specific to how you run your specific PTA, how you administer your PTA. So whereas in the bylaws, it's going to list that you have, a president, 2 vice presidents, a secretary, a treasurer, your standing rules will actually get more involved in the job description. Who are your VPs? Is it your communications VP? Is it your programs VP? The update process for the bylaws is a little more formal than changing the things about your standing rules. And that might make sense because the bylaws are the structures that are really the framework for all the PTAs. So the standing rules, you're more easy to update them. So you can actually update your standing rules at any PTA meeting. If you give notice in advance of that PTA meeting, it only takes a simple majority. And if you don't tell anyone that you want to make some changes to your standing rules, then you need a few more people in the room to approve that. So that'd be a 2/3 majority. And so the next slide, we'll actually start digging into a little bit more about what the bylaws are. On the cover page has the basic information. You have a national ID as well as a state ID. Again, these are things that maybe California PTA needs to know. They might ask you, you can always find them on your bylaws. Your legal name of your PTA is on the front cover. So sometimes people might think that it's, for example, Sherman Elementary PTA. That's actually not the official legal name. It's Sherman PTA without the elementary. So you want to be sure exactly what the legal name is. And when you're opening a bank account, for example, that would be important. As we heard Carol talk about this structure where there's national PTA and state PTAs, districts, councils, and units. We are out of councils. We're a smaller district. So if anyone asks you about councils, you just say we're out of council. And you'll find your address and the grades and the date that your PTA organized. Some have been here for over 100 years. And the next slide where we'll sort of skip through and you can see some of the details that you will find in your bylaws. Besides the name and the purpose and policies and principles that are same across the board, in Article 4, you'll have the membership dues. So membership dues is something that your organization at your school can decide what works for your community. So some PTAs have dues of $5 and some PTAs have dues of $25. It usually ranges somewhere in between $5 and $25. I'd say most often $10. It's good to be aware that a portion of your dues, in fact, it's $4.75 of each paid member's dues, do get forwarded through channels, they say. So a portion of that goes to support the district PTA. A portion of your dues go to support California PTA and national PTA. And that helps us with trainings and conventions and helps us to support our members. And so we can talk more in the membership breakout training at the end of this morning about different ways to work with membership. A lot of people will say, is that a barrier to joining PTA? And we never want finances or having to pay membership dues be a reason why someone would not join as an official member. And there's things we can talk about with that as well. Article 5 lists your officers. We will also find information about how to run your elections, like what the date of your election should be. Elections are always held in March or April, but no later than the second week in April. And you can find all that information in your bylaws. It will describe some of the duties of officers. You can appoint and assign chair people. It will have association meetings and rules like quorums. Quorums simply mean the number of people that you need to have in order to conduct business at either a board meeting or an association meeting. Again, in the meat of the bylaws, you'll have a lot of those just identifying numbers that you may need for certain forms that you're filling out. You can always refer to your bylaws for that. And if you join me after at the end for the parliamentarian breakout room for training, we will go more into the process for updating bylaws, which is every 5 years. Although you always need to review your bylaws for any needed changes annually. The minimum requirement is to change them every 5 years. Are there any questions in the chat? I'm just looking. I don't know if I hope everyone can hear me okay if I was having internet trouble. Okay, next slide. Let's see. So one good idea that I would suggest for anyone on your board to help your members get through the bylaws, they're always welcome to see the full version of it, but it's to create a little tour guide, so a summary. And these are the key things that you might want to include in your summary. If you click, Michelle, are you able to click on that bylaws summary just real quick? And we can put that in the chat and provide these things after when we send out recordings of everything. But it shows.
I can exit out. I can't click on it.
Oh,
while
that's okay. That's okay. Or we can put it in the chat. It's just a sample summary, and it has our second district PTA bylaws summary. It's just a summary to show you what you might want to do a little Cliff Notes version of the bylaws. Let's see, when do the bylaws updates go into effect once submitted? So that's a good question about the process, and I will just run you quickly through the process. I think I might actually have that on the next slide. No, I don't. But so in the general bylaws process, you want to review them annually, and so the parliamentarian usually chairs a bylaws review committee. That can just be 2 or 3 people. They might decide that there's no changes that are needed, or they might decide that we need to add, another vice president, for example. So the first step is to have your board approve those changes. Once the board approves the changes, you will submit those to us at the district, and we will get the California PTA parliamentarian to sign and approve those bylaws. Once they're returned to you, approved by the California State PTA parliamentarian, it's at that point that you can bring your bylaws to your membership to adopt. So the changes in your bylaws do not come into effect until they've been approved by the state and then adopted by your membership. So for example, if you decided you wanted to change the membership dues amount, you would have the board approve that, you submit them for approval by state PTA, and then when they come back, signed by that state parliamentarian, your board would adopt them. So you can't, collect the new dues amount until after that full process has happened. That's why I say it's a lot easier to update those specifics about how you run your PTA, which are in those last 2 pages called the standing rules. So those things don't have to go through that longer process. They can just be updated from meeting to meeting as needed. I will say that the bylaws process since the pandemic has actually sped up a bit. At the beginning of this year, there was a little bit of a slowdown, but all of the bylaws process, it's updated through email now. And so it does tend to be a lot quicker, whereas it could take over a month in the past. It's taking about 2 weeks on average. And so the next slide, please. Just want to emphasize that we're here to support in this process. We support a lot through bylaws update process. If you're just unsure where to get started, reach out to us and we will point you to this, most likely the e-bylaws, the bylaws updates process electronically. It's basically just gives you a survey, you answer some questions and it spits out a nice PDF version of your bylaws, and that's what we submit via email for you. There's tons of information to help you answer questions besides just in your bylaws on californiapta.org or capta.org, capta.org. We'll have not just information about your bylaws, but answers to almost any question that you have. It can be a little overwhelming with the amount of information that's provided online. And again, that's why we're here to answer your calls, answer your emails, any questions about how to run your PTA. If you're staying a little bit longer for our training, at the end, at the parliamentarian section, we will talk about nominating committees, which is electing your board members for next year. And just as another reminder, we are still in need of a district PTA parliamentarian. We've gone without this whole year, but I'm very thankful to a couple of our other board members for forming a team. So we work as team parliamentarian at 2nd District PTA. And so that could be you as a 2nd District parliamentarian. How are we doing on time, Michelle? Do I have time for questions or should people join in the breakout room?
We could take a question or two and then we can move on to the next thing,
Okay.
Or they can put questions in the chat and we can answer them that way too.
And we definitely will be sharing these slides, all of them, after probably next week sometime, as well as the recordings. We have a YouTube channel where we share the recordings, and our 2nd District website should have these links as well next week. And we'll send it out in the newsletter. And so there's a question in the chat about, do all of our units in our district have the same bylaws? They have the same structure, but they are not all the same because there are differences. The different officers you have, the different dues that you have, all those sort of fill in the blank. So the fill in the blank sections are specific to your units, but other than that, the bylaws are the same for the main structure. And if you're wondering how to sign up for our newsletter, we ask that if you are an officer and you've just been elected, that you update with the new officers in our system called My PTEZ. If you are not familiar with that, please reach out to us and we will be, we can help you through that, or just email us and we can make sure that you are included. If you're not an officer and still want to receive the newsletter, we can add you there if requested as well. So you can just send us an email at 2nd District and maybe someone can put our website as well as one of our main emails in the chat. Thank you. All right, thank you for walking through the bylaws with me real quick.